The train screamed once, then rolled away into the gray. Smoke dragged over the empty platform and broke apart in the wind. Lila stood there with one hand on her small valise and the other pressed to her ribs. Her cough burned hot in her chest, sharp as wire. The iron wheels faded and the sound died fast, leaving only the cold. Dust slid along the boards. The sky over Dry Creek Station was the color of old bruise. 7 buildings, 1 rail line, and no one waiting. The telegraph office was dark. The livery stood open to the wind. Lila stared down the track, as if the man from the letters might still appear out of the haze. No rider came. No wagon. Her breath shook. There was nothing behind her and nothing in front of her but this hard land. If he was not here, where was she supposed to go? Her name was Lila Boone, and she had ridden west from Kentucky with a promise folded in her skirt pocket. Cole Maddox, age 36, of Stone Mesa Ranch. His letters had spoken of coffee black as coal, solid walls, and a place at his table. He had called her sturdy enough on paper. Standing on that platform, thin as a switch and pale from months of coughing, she was not sure he would say the same face to face. She walked into town with the wind at her back. Dry Creek was smaller than it had looked from the rail car. A church with peeling paint. A saloon with its doors swung wide, laughter and smoke spilling out. A jail the size of a shed. A general store with cloudy windows and a bell that jangled when she pushed the door. The woman behind the counter had sharp eyes and a pinched mouth. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for Cole Maddox," Lila said. Her voice came out thin. "Stone Mesa Ranch." The woman's gaze traveled from Lila's worn boots to her hollow cheeks. Something in her face shut like a door. "Maddox married near a month back," she said. "Girl from over Willow Ford way. Big-boned, strong lungs. You must be the one he stopped writing." The words landed like a slow knife. Lila held her valise tighter so her hands would not shake. "I see," she said. The woman sniffed. "Name's Mabel Kitt. There's no hotel here. You can sleep in the loft above the livery if you've a mind. Talk to my husband about sweeping or mending. That's all I can offer." "Thank you," Lila said. She said it steady. She walked out before the tears could rise. She did not cry that night in the hayloft. She had emptied herself long ago, when fever took her brothers one after the other, and the bank took the family farm after that. Her father had called her too small to save anything, too frail to carry the Boone name. She had believed him once. The boards under the thin horse blanket were rough. Her lungs ached. She stared up into the dark and listened to the horses breathe, and she told herself she had come this far. She would not die here like a stray dog. By the 3rd day, she was mending shirts in the back of the general store for salt pork and beans. Her coat, good wool once, was no match for the prairie wind. Lila kept her eyes on the needle and tried to cough only when no one stood near. Dry Creek watched her the way men watched a broken wagon on the side of the road, curious, waiting to see if it ever moved again. It was on the 7th day that the big man rode in from the hills. He came on a draft horse the color of riverstone, shoulders broad enough to block the door when he stepped inside. His beard was thick and sun-faded. His coat was buffalo hide, still damp at the hem from some creek crossing. He smelled of cold air and smoke and animals. The bell over the door jangled, and the room seemed to shrink. Mabel Kitt leaned over the counter toward him. "Morning, Grant," she said. "Nails and flour again?" The man nodded once. "And salt," he said. His voice was low, rough from disuse. He did not look at Lila at first, but his gaze slid there when the needle slipped in her hand. He saw the tremble and the quick stain of blood on the thread. She felt his eyes and looked up, too tired to be ashamed. "Who's she?" he asked. "Mail-order bride that got left at the station," Mabel said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Sickly one. Don't waste your time." He took that in without changing his face. Then he studied Lila again. "What can you do?" he asked her. She lifted her chin. "I can read," she said. "I can sew. I can keep a fire going and boil broth. I can clean a wound and wash what needs washing." "You cough like it hurts," he said. "It does," she answered, "but it hasn't killed me yet." A corner of his mouth twitched. "You know goats?" he asked. "No, but I can learn." He stood still a long moment, like a man weighing a winter sky. Then he set his sack of flour on the counter. "2 sacks of feed, Mabel, and another blanket." Mabel blinked. "What for?" He did not answer her. He looked at Lila. "Get your things," he said. Lila rose. Her knees wobbled, but she did not sway. There was nothing to gather but the little valise and the worn coat on her back. When she stepped out into the street, the wind cut through her again, sharp and thin. The man offered his hand to help her onto the big horse. "My name's Grant Mercer," he said. "I run a place up in Ember Hollow." "Lila," she said. "Lila Boone." He gave a short nod, then swung up in front of her. She sat behind him, her valise strapped down, her hands gripping the rough leather of his coat. The horse moved, slow but sure, and town fell away behind them. The trail climbed in hard, broken lines through the hills. Sage scraped the horse's legs. Patches of old snow clung in the shadows of rocks. The sun bled red through the clouds as it dropped, and the air grew colder with each turn. Lila's cough clawed at her chest, but she pressed her face into the back of Grant's coat and breathed smoke and hide and something steady. He did not speak on the way up, not to soothe her, not to explain. He rode like a man who had long ago made peace with silence. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk was thick over the land. Ember Hollow opened around them, a bowl of dark hills and thin trees scratched against the sky. The cabin stood on a rise. Rough timbers, a stone chimney breathing smoke. A small goat pen sat behind, the fence half buried in old drift. Grant helped her down. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of iron and pine. There was a potbelly stove, a table, 2 chairs, shelves with jars, and a narrow cot against the wall. No lace, no pictures. Only order. "You can use the cot for now," he said. He set her valise near the stove. "You'll eat and sleep here while we see how it goes." "I'll work," Lila said at once. "I won't be a burden." "This isn't charity," he answered. "Room and food for labor. You do your part, you stay." She nodded. That was more than any man had put plain to her before. "Take off your boots," he said. "You'll clean in the morning. Wash what's dirty. I'll show you the goats at dawn." The heat soaked into her bones as she tugged off her boots. Her lungs burned, but this time it was from warmth, not the knife edge of cold. Grant set water to boil and dropped barley and jerky into a pot. They ate without many words. He did not ask about Kentucky or letters or the man who had chosen someone else. She did not offer. When she coughed, she turned her head away. He watched her for a moment. "You're lighter than you should be," he said. "We'll fix that." "I can make broth," she replied, "if you've bone and roots." He pointed to a shelf. "Use what you find." Quote, the days that followed cut a new shape into her life. She rose before the sun, fingers numb as she shoveled snow from the pen and scattered feed. Grant showed her how to hold a skittish goat, how to check hooves, how to tie a proper knot. Her legs shook by noon. Her hands cracked from water and lye. Still, she kept the fire going, scrubbed the floorboards, mended his shirts, and boiled broth until the steam fogged the tiny windows. Grant spoke little, but his quiet was not cruel. When a coughing fit made her drop a bucket, he lifted it without a comment. When her fingers split, he left a tin of rendered fat on the table. When a fever chill rattled her bones, he set an extra quilt by the cot and said nothing at all. At night, she read aloud from the 2 books he owned, a worn Bible and an old almanac. Her voice was thin but steady. Sometimes, when the wind howled down the hollow, he let her keep reading longer than the page required. By the second week, the tightness in her chest softened. The cough still hunted her, but it was no longer all she felt. The storm came without warning. Clouds rolled in from the north, thick and low. The air dropped sharp as a blade. By noon, snow was driving sideways past the windows, a white wall that swallowed the hills. The goats bawled in their pen, banging against the fence. "They'll drift if the gate goes," Grant said, dragging on his coat. He grabbed the rifle and a length of rope. "You shouldn't go out," Lila said. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. "It's too thick. You'll lose yourself in it." "They're mine to lose," he answered. He wrapped a scarf over his beard and stepped into the roar. Hours stretched. The cabin shook. Snow forced itself in under the door and pooled in cold little islands. Lila kept the fire fierce, boiled water, laid towels to stop the drafts. Every time the wind screamed, she thought of his broad back vanishing into white. When the door finally pushed open, he staggered inside with snow in his beard and ice on his lashes. A kid, Goat, kicked weakly over his shoulder. Another hung limp in his arm, neck twisted wrong. Lila moved fast. She took his coat. She pulled the living kid near the stove and rubbed its sides with rough cloth until it wheezed and cried out. She set water to boil, poured it into a tin cup, tossed in dried roots, and pressed it into Grant's shaking hands. "You shouldn't have gone," she said. Her voice was low but firm. "You could have died out there." He stared into the steam. "They were mine," he said. "Mine to lose or keep." "You don't have to lose everything," she answered. For a long moment he did not drink. He just looked at her, snow melting down his temples, something raw and quiet behind his pale eyes. Then he took the cup and swallowed. That night the blizzard battered the roof. The walls groaned. The saved kid slept in a box by the stove, sides rising and falling. Lila lay on the cot, watching shadows move across the rafters. From the other side of the cabin, Grant's voice came through the dark. "You think you'll stay when the thaw comes?" he asked. Lila listened to the wind claw at the shutters. She thought of the empty platform, the letters that had stopped, the long road back to nowhere. She let out a slow breath. "If I'm welcome," she said, "I'll stay." There was a pause. The fire popped. "You're welcome," he answered. In the quiet that followed, with snow piled deep around the cabin and the hollow wrapped in white, her heart settled like it had finally found a place to rest. Spring crept into Ember Hollow slow and cautious, as if testing the ground before stepping in. The snow loosened first, melting into long silver threads that ran down the hillside and filled the creek. The air warmed enough for Lila to breathe without her lungs catching fire. The goats grew louder, hungry and restless. Grant repaired the fence with steady swings of his hammer, while she salted hides and swept out the corners winter had claimed. Day by day she felt steadier. Her cough did not vanish, but it softened into something she could manage. She no longer woke shaking from the cold. Her cheeks held a little color. She could carry buckets without dropping them. Each task she finished left her stronger than the one before. Grant didn't say much about it, but sometimes, when she brought in the morning water or set a fresh pot of broth on the stove, she caught him watching her with a look she didn't know how to name, like he was memorizing something he never expected to see. One morning in late April, a stranger walked out of the trees. He came on foot, boots worn thin, hat pulled low. Lila saw him first as she hung laundry on the line. His stride was slow but sure, his eyes sharp and searching. He smiled at her with too many teeth. "Evenin', miss," he said, though it was barely noon. "I'm lookin' for a bit of shelter, just a place to warm up and rest these feet." Grant stepped out of the barn before she could answer. His size alone shifted the air. The stranger's smile faltered for a breath. "You can sit by the fire," Grant said. "One night. Food's thin." "I'll take thin," the man said, glancing around the cabin, the pen, the rifle leaning by the door. "You two married?" Neither answered. Grant ladled half a tin of beans into a bowl. Lila kept quiet. Something about the stranger's eyes made her skin tighten. He asked too much, looked too long. When the wind rattled the shutters, he flinched like a guilty man. He left at dawn with a nod that didn't reach his eyes. A length of rope went missing. One of the goats limped when she walked. Grant found the tracks in the dirt, boot prints, one dragging slightly on the left side, heading east. "There'll be more," he said as he checked the fence line. "Men like him don't travel alone." "For what?" she asked. "Things to take." The cold that slid through her chest then was not the kind snow brought. It was older. It lived in the memories she never spoke aloud. The next morning, she lifted the rifle from the rack. Grant raised a brow. "You planning to use that?" "If I need to." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's teach you how it kicks." They walked to the clearing beyond the creek. Grant set old cans on a split rail and handed her the rifle. The wood was rough and solid. She braced it against her shoulder the way he showed her. Her first shot missed wide. Her second spun the can clean off the rail. "You've got good eyes," he said. "I used to thread needles by candlelight," she answered. He smiled then, a small shift of his mouth, but real. They trained every morning after that. Her shoulder bruised deep purple, but her aim grew steady. She slept better at night, not because the world had turned kind, but because she no longer felt helpless inside it. Then the letter came. A trapper passing through left it on the porch. A single folded page, stained, no address, only her name written across the front in a heavy hand. Lila. Inside was one line. "He's coming to find you." She read it twice. The room went still around her. Grant was splitting wood outside. She held the letter a long moment before she stepped into the yard. He saw her face before she spoke. "Who is it?" he asked. "My father." Grant's jaw tightened. Not with anger, with something colder. "How would he know you're here?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't leave word, but folks talk in towns. A girl like me gets noticed." Grant folded the paper once and set it on the chopping block as if it might strike. Then we get ready. Quote, "The days that followed sharpened like a blade." Grant added another bolt to the cabin door, reinforced the shutters, cleared the brush that blocked the view down the hill. They practiced shooting each dawn until her arms trembled and her lungs burned. At night, she slept with her boots beside the cot. Her cough returned, thinner but faster, dragged up by nerves that wrapped tight around her ribs. One night, as wind pushed cold through the cracks, she asked softly, "If he comes and I can't stop him, would you?" Grant didn't answer at first. The fire popped. The goats stirred in the pen outside. "I don't kill for another man's sins," he said at last. "But if he means to take what's mine, I won't ask twice." She didn't ask what he meant. In some quiet corner of her chest, she hoped he meant her, someone worth defending, not owning. Late May came with green hills and thawed creek water, but the shadow stayed. It was June 3rd when she saw the rider, a lone figure on a bay mare, cutting across the ridge with purpose. No supplies, no gear, a long coat, a shotgun strapped to his back, his posture stiff, familiar in a way that made her hands go cold. Grant came to stand beside her. "That him?" Leela did not answer at first. Then she nodded. "His name's Cyrus Boone." Grant lowered the rifle but didn't set it down. "You want to run?" "No." He nodded once. "Then we stand." The man dismounted at the edge of the clearing and walked the last stretch on foot, slow, measured, the way a preacher might approach a pulpit. He stopped 10 paces out. "You're mine," Cyrus said. His voice was dry as old bark. "By law or blood?" "I'm not yours," Lila said. Her voice didn't shake. He laughed, one hollow sound. "You ran, shamed me, took breath you didn't deserve." "I didn't take anything from you," she answered. "You never gave anything worth keeping." Grant shifted the rifle. Cyrus's eyes snapped to him. "You think you've tamed her?" Cyrus sneered. "She's always been fragile. Born wrong. Living wrong." Lila stepped forward 1 pace. "You raised your voice at us. That's all you ever raised." The wind rustled the grass. A goat bleated behind the cabin. Cyrus reached for the shotgun. The shot cracked the air before his hand touched the grip. Cyrus dropped to his knees, a bloom of blood spreading across his coat. He gasped, eyes wide, stunned like a man who had never expected to bleed. Lila didn't scream. She walked toward him, slow, steady, her breath sharp in the cold air. "You came all this way," she said, standing over him. "For what?" He spat blood. "To remind you. I haven't forgotten." She knelt, pulled the shotgun from his reach, snapped it open. 2 shells fell into the dirt. She turned her back on him. "Let the land take him," she told Grant. "It buries men like him better than any grave." They didn't speak of it again. Buzzards circled the ridge for days. The hollow stayed quiet. And something inside Lila, something that had been shaking since the day she stepped off the train, finally went still. Summer pressed into Ember Hollow, with heat that shimmered off the hills. The fire came early that year. First, only a rumor from riders passing through Dry Creek, then a dark smudge rising over the western ridge. Grant saw it before Lila did, a line of smoke drifting like a warning across the sky. "Fire near Barlow Pass," he said as he came up the slope with a bundle of traps on his shoulder. "Too far to worry yet, but if the wind shifts, we'll need to be ready." They were ready that same night. They hauled water from the creek till their arms shook. They soaked burlap sacks and cleared brush around the cabin. Lila's lungs burned, but she did not stop. Grant dug a trench around the goat pen, sweat cutting lines through soot on his face. "You're not what I expected," he said as they worked, his voice rough from the heat. "Neither are you," she answered. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the wind carried sparks ahead of the fire. The sky glowed orange, brighter with every hour. By dusk, the flames marched across the ridge like a living thing. And then it came. The fire roared down the hillside, eating scrub and grass in one rush. Heat bent the air into waves. The sky turned the color of rusted blood. Lila wrapped a wet cloth over her mouth and ran to the goat pen, shoving canvas over the frightened animals. One cried hard and low, choking. Grant fought the edge of the blaze with wet sacks, beating sparks before they caught. Flames leapt at the eaves. He threw water across the roof, the steam rising like breath. They did not speak. The fire spoke enough. When the flames surged close, Lila felt her cough seize sharp in her chest. She pressed a hand to her ribs and swung again with the burlap. She would not lose this cabin. She would not lose the life they had clawed together from nothing. One goat died anyway, smoke in its lungs, legs trembling until they stilled. The fire raged through the night. They worked until their muscles failed. And in the hour before dawn, the flames turned, driven by a sudden shift in the wind, and rolled past the hollow. What remained behind was black. Trees burned hollow, glowing red inside their bones. The hills lay in ash. The western wall of the cabin was charred deep, but still standing. The new room, her room, was untouched. They buried the dead goat near the creek, neither speaking. When the ground turned over the last of the dirt, Grant's shoulders sank, not in defeat, but in something quieter, heavier. Lila stood beside him and rested her hand on his arm. "We're still here," she said. He looked at her like he was trying to believe that simple truth. Over the next weeks, they rebuilt the cabin wall and moved the pen east. Grant hunted farther into the mountains. Lila dried meat on racks she built herself. The air still held the memory of fire, but it began to sweeten as the land healed. Shoots of green pushed through the black soil. The creek ran brighter. People from town came riding up the hollow one day, thin horses kicking dust. They stared at the blackened hills, then at the cabin still standing. "You two survived that fire alone?" a merchant asked. Grant shrugged. "We had what we needed." Lila stood behind him, steady as the ridge itself. The merchant tipped his hat toward her. "If you're still looking for a husband, miss, I know a few." "I found one," she said, "and I kept the land too." Quote. After they rode off, Grant raised an eyebrow at her. "Didn't know that's what we were." She wiped her hands on her apron. "You built me a room. What did you think it meant?" For the first time, she saw his smile stretch wide enough to show teeth. "Thought maybe it meant you were staying," he said. "I am." "Then it means whatever you want it to." Her hand brushed his. "What do you want it to mean?" He looked down at her, the scar on his knuckle catching the light. "That you're not sleeping in that bed alone anymore." And she didn't. They didn't wed with papers or preacher. They wed with work. with days shared side by side. With the quiet certainty that built itself between them, Lila began carving marks into the doorframe of her room, one line for each spring they survived, each storm they beat back, each year she chose to stay. By the end of summer, there were 3 marks. The 4th was coming. Her belly grew slow, then sure, enough that she could no longer carry heavy buckets. Grant noticed before she said a word. When she struggled with the pail, he stepped forward and took it without comment. "I'm not broken," she told him. "No," he said softly, "you're building." They spoke little about the child, not from fear, out of reverence. Lila touched her stomach at dawn as she sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl, feeling the hollow breathe beneath frost and silence. The winter came quiet, not the tearing storms of her first year. Snow fell in soft blankets. The goats birthed again. The cabin stayed warm, tended by hands that knew exactly how to keep a fire alive. One night, when the wind rattled loose ice from the eaves, Lila woke to a low pain tightening across her back. She stood, breathed once, then leaned over Grant and whispered, "It's time." He rose without fumbling. He lit both lanterns, laid down the blankets, and boiled water. They had no midwife, no doctor, only memory, instinct, and faith. The labor stretched long. Lila gripped Grant's hand until his knuckles whitened. Her breath came in hard bursts. The world narrowed to pain and fire and the feel of his arm around her shoulders. The child arrived just before dawn, her cry sharp and alive. "A girl!" Grant knelt beside them as Lila wrapped the tiny body in linen stitch during quiet winter nights. The baby's eyes were dark. Her hands curled into small, fierce fists. "She's smaller than I hoped," Lila whispered. Grant brushed a finger across the child's cheek. "She's stronger than she looks." They named her Wren. The cabin grew different after that. Not louder, just full. The creak of a cradle. The soft breaths of an infant sleeping. The rustle of Grant's boots as he moved gentler than she had ever seen him move before. Lila no longer coughed in the mornings. Spring broke across the valley with wildflowers climbing through blackened soil. Birds returned to the creek. The goats climbed the hills again, stubborn and loud. One afternoon, Lila stepped onto the porch with Wren tucked safe in her arms. The breeze smelled of pine and new earth. Grant came up behind her and wrapped his arms around both of them. "She'll know it all," he said, voice low. "The hard, the holy, the fire, and the silence." Quote, Lila nodded, her cheek resting against his chest. "She'll know what it means to stay," she said softly. "And what it cost." Behind them, the doorframe held 4 carved marks, and a 5th waited for the knife.